Thank you for tuning in, everybody. As promised, we've got Kate part 3. We're going to say GG, the GG for the grooming gang, because the algorithm, YouTube is really suppressing Kate's story, and it's ridiculous because it's so important. It should be heard. People are even getting put in prison for talking about these things. It is insane. But meanwhile, the vote came in to, investigate the GG in London, and all the main political parties, including Reform, voted it down, which is absolutely obscene. So it's voices like Kate that continue to shine a light on it. It's so important that we share this story and we introduce other people to it, because YouTube is trying to hide it, and the powers that be, the politicians, are trying to hide it. All of Kate's links are in the description box below this video. So if you've watched the previous 2 with Kate, those links are down there as well. But it's a very harrowing story. We thought it had ended in part 1 and she'd emerged, but she got ended up in the Birmingham GG, ended up overseas. Absolutely heinous. Towards the end of part 2, she is emerging from it, but there's kind of forces at work in her mind, pulling her back to it. And in this episode, we're going to talk about other girls that the GG unalived, documented cases. We're going to talk about Kate meeting Tommy Robinson, and he's in prison right now. He's been exposing this very divisive character. There's good and bad in everyone, and his good side is he has been, an absolute trooper, showing the public what about these crimes when they were trying to be suppressed by the politicians and the media, and he's paid a hell of a price for it. And then we'll talk about Kate, her recovery, how she's become the strong woman that she is today, and what she's doing now, and how you can continue to help her and support her in her education. A donation link for education is down there as well. So I hope that just about summarizes it, Kate, where we're going today. And thanks for coming back.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for having me. Do you want me to talk a bit where we left off? Do you want me to talk about the court cases? I'm just and then lead it on.
So in the chronology
to the girls that were unalived.
In the chronology of all of this stuff, was it the unaliving first, or was it the court cases first?
Well, the revealing of the unaliving happened in the middle of while my court cases were going on. So I'd had one for so I'd had one court case for Shamil that came about in 2011. And then I had a court case where the perpetrator was found not guilty in 2012. And then I had my final case in 2015 with Mohammed Ali Sultan. The unaliving of the girls, so they had happened prior to me ever being abused, but they only came to light in sort of 2018 when the Mirror reported on it.
How many girls do you estimate from your area were unalived?
So the report says that there were 5 girls that they've identified that were unalived. There may have been more that were never kind of associated with the GG, but still, as a result of that, passed away. But I don't know. There was 5 that were identified. There are some unresolved unalivings as well, that are, I won't be able to discuss. But yeah, so there's still ongoing sort of investigations, I suppose, into what the scale of that was. Which is, that's horrible to think about, to be honest. I think it's scary. I think, it's really, really scary that I come from this town and I met these people, or I came into any contact with them, and I feel like now that we know the scale of how bad things were, I feel lucky that I'm alive, that like I didn't get unalived, and I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go along. So they estimated that so in 2018 the Mirror estimated there were up to 1,000 girls that had been abused in Telford by the GG. And authorities have failed to act over the last 40 years. So, and, you know, I know that we know some of these things, like they targeted girls as young as 11. It went on. So it went on for 40 years. I'm just reading a bit of the article now, but I only want to read the important bit. It's a long one. So this is what they found out in 2018. This is what brought on the Telford independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation. So the Mirror did a lot of work in trying to investigate what was going on, the history of it. And I was part of that as well. So it was led by one survivor called Holly Archer, but many survivors put in their information, gave their information to the Mirror to aid in the support of this report, including myself. So the Mirror requested all my documents from the police under a Freedom of Information Act request. So I got to see all my own documents as well, which I found very confusing, actually, because a lot of it was in like text type, police speak, and it wasn't obvious. They just put notes down, and it wasn't like obvious what was going on with that. So I just gave that all to the Mirror, and I didn't really understand what I was looking at. So they found what they found was that social workers knew about the abuse in the 90s, but the police took a decade to launch a probe. The council staff viewed abused and trafficked children, transported transported children as I don't know if I'm allowed to say prostitutes, instead
of ladies of the night, let's say.
Yeah, all right, ladies of the night. Oh, children as ladies of the night. Can you imagine? Instead of victims, according to the previously unseen files. So now they're actually viewing the files that are saying that. Authorities failed to keep details of abusers from Asian communities in fear of being called racist. Police failed to investigate one recent case 5 times until an MP intervened. One victim said cops tried to stop her finding out why her abusers had not been prosecuted because they feared that she would talk to the press. Which is awful as well, isn't it? That, you know, a police cover-up, they're kind of insinuating that. The scale of the abuse uncovered in Telford, which has a population of 170,000, is feared to be the most brutal and long-running of all of them. That's what they've reported. The Rotherham toll was put at 1,500 victims, but that was in a community of 260,000. So we're talking about nearly 100,000 less in population, but a much higher percentage of children who were abused by the GG. These are some facts that I didn't know. Now I'm reading. So I'm just going to scroll down to the children that were unalived. So the first one that they've reported, so they fear that 5 dead as abusers' tentacles leave trails of pain and tragedy. A mum and 4 girls have died in tragedies linked to the abuse. Lucy Lowe was the first one. She was unalived in the year 2000, along with her mother and her sister. The house was burnt down. A 26-year-old abuser, Azhar Ali Mahmood, set fire to the house. Cabby Mahmood, he was a cab driver. He targeted Lucy in 1997, and she was only 14 and gave birth to his daughter, age 14. And the police weren't investigating this. You know, the police were saying that it was her fault at the age of 14. He was jailed for the unaliving of Lucy, and for her mum, Eileen, and her 17-year-old sister, Sarah. But he was never arrested nor charged in connection with any child sex crimes, or over his illegal relationship with her as a schoolgirl. Lucy's death was used as a warning to other girls, according to victims. One drugged and gang essayed by 9 men 2 years later said the threats drove her to attempt suicide. So that was a common thing with many survivors reporting that GG members would use the story of Lucy to scare them into thinking that their family were at risk, or they were at risk, or the same would happen to them. So one victim said she was scared her family would die like Lucy's, and thought she'd only be safe if she unalived herself, or her family would only be safe if she unalived herself. In 2002, 13-year-old Becky Watson died in a car accident that was reported at the time as a prank. So I know some more details about that. The man who unalived her, his name was Ahmad Nawaz. That's reported in another article. He gave her a ride on the bonnet of his car, and she fell off, and he ran her over. So that's how he was unalived. The Mirror investigation found that she'd suffered 2 years of abuse by Agent Gigi, which began when she was just aged 11 years old. Sorry, this is really upsetting. So I'm like trying not to cry as I say this, because I wrote diaries myself, but they've said tragic diaries obtained by the Mirror that Becky had written revealed her torment at being made to sleep around. Sorry, I just have to pause for a minute, because it's so upsetting to think that nobody did anything for these girls. She was 13 when she died, and I read the newspaper article that they released at the time. I think she died in 2002, so there's still newspaper articles out there. And the way that the police spoke about her and the witnesses was absolutely disgusting. Like, sometimes I think we could actually prosecute police officers just by their statements that were given to the press at the time. So that should be counted as, because it's disgusting, and I'm reading it and I just think you can't talk like that about a victim. I find this stuff really upsetting. And I find, like, sometimes I can't read articles because it just brings me to tears. So Becky's mum, Torrin Watson, said that she repeatedly told police that Becky was being abused, and even gave them a list of suspects, and they still didn't investigate it. She told the Mirror girls like Becky were being treated like criminals. I was crying out for, sorry, I can't read in 1 second. I was crying out for help, but it felt like I had nowhere to turn. If Becky's abuse had been properly investigated by authorities, more girls could have been saved from going through this hell. And then the next girl, Vicky Round, a friend of Becky's, was abused by the same gang who got her hooked on crack cocaine at age 12. Sorry.
You're fine. You know, one of the things Kate said to me that she feels lucky, and you know, we've all heard what Kate went through. It's horrific, and she feels lucky because she didn't get unalive like these other girls, so that her experience was actually less horrific than theirs because they got unalived. So how sickening is it to think about that? That's just disgusting. That these monsters would go as far as to ruin these girls' lives from such young ages and then to kill them and hardly face any consequences,
Yeah.
as Kate is going to elaborate.
So Vicky was so she was hooked on crack cocaine at age 12, and then she was on heroin by the time she was 14. She died at the age of 20 of a drug related incident, and her sister Emma told the Mirror, "I have no doubt Vicky would still be here if she hadn't been so badly abused. Yet the people who made her life hell still walk the streets." So they give a bit of a timeline of abuse as well, which might be useful for me to read out. So in the early 1980s, vulnerable Telford girls were targeted by groups of mainly Asian men. In 1996, a concerned resident claims she told police about the activities of a key abuser selling underage girls for sex. Late 1990s, files reveal social workers learned of the problem but do little to help. 2000, Lucy Lowe is unalived alongside her mum and sister in an arson attack by abuser Azar Ali Mahmood, who made her pregnant at 14. If he's still alive, if he's still around, even if he's still in prison, I think they should prosecute him, because she had a child who's now grown up, and that's physical evidence that that happened. You know, if he's the father of that child and she was the mother, and we can say the date that she was 14, then we know that that happened. I don't even think that we need her to be alive for him to be prosecuted for that.
There is no justice. There is no
No.
justice, and these girls would be completely forgotten if you weren't talking about them right now.
Yeah. I think I actually think about Becky quite a lot, even though I never met her, so I never knew any of these girls. I'll tell you in a moment. So, so 2000, Lucy Lowe was unalived with her mum and her sister. 2002, abuse victim Becky Watson, age 13, killed in the road accident. 2009, Becky's friend Vicky Round dies of a drugs-related incident after enduring 9 years of sex hell at the hands of a string of PDF files, is what they put. 2010 to 2012, police probe dubbed Operation Chalice identifies a potential 200 abusers, but only 9 are jailed. 2 further probes collapse. In August 2016, the Sunday Mirror reports that the problem is continuing outside underage discos in the town, but some complaints provided by volunteer street pastors are not properly logged. So 2016, September 2016, MP Lucy Allen calls for a public inquiry, but police and council officials in Telford write to the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, saying this isn't necessary. In March 2018, which is this article, the Sunday Mirror reveals there could be up to 1,000 victims of the scandal, and links to 5 unalived to the abuse. So the whole time, the Telford authorities were actually fighting this public inquiry, and it wasn't until the work that Holly Archer did with the Mirror that actually got the public inquiry and made it happen. So she played a really, really key role in the fight for justice for the Telford victims. Sorry, I'm going to cry again. I'm kind of laughing at myself crying, but it's really, really sad. And I'm really proud of Holly Archer for what she's done for Telford, because she took a massive lead role in that. And it can't have been easy the whole time either. Sorry.
You're all right. Take your time. Take your time. And Kate is going to talk about meeting Tommy Robinson. And like I said at the very beginning, there's good and bad in everybody. On this channel, we focus on the good in the hope that it comes out. And we do not want any hate in the comments about anyone. So I know he's a very divisive character. I was communicating with him before he went to prison. I was supposed to interview him actually, and he ended up having to leave the country because there was a drone attack on him and his family. So, like I said, there's good and bad in everybody. Let's focus on the good, please. When Kate gets to that point of the story, this story is about Kate, what she has been through. You can see, sharing her story, she's reliving some of this, the emotion, the memories, and let's just keep it all love and support in the chat, please. No hate for anyone. Yeah.
And thank you, Sean. So we finally, I don't know where to start at now. But we finally got the independent inquiry started. I think I don't know when it started now. It started in 2021. I don't know when it started. Anyway, so this article came out in 2018, and then shortly after that, I can find out, and I can probably just look it up.
Yeah, many of you remember Andrew Gold, who was my co-host for years. He had Tommy on his channel before Tommy went to prison. I think that was one of his last interviews that he did. We've also had Gurumit Singh on this channel, who he was in the prison. He was part of what Tommy formed years ago, and he ended up in prison with a hit on him from the Muslim prison gang. It's quite an interesting story from Gurumit because he's going through the prison system with this hit on him the whole time, and it's serious stuff, but he does get through it.
So it looks like it started in it might have started in 2019. It was certainly kick-started in 2018, and then Evershed Sutherland LLP was appointed as the commissioning body on the 22nd of January 2019. I do know that they also the police also did another operation. I think it was called Summer or something. Or Summerfield, or trying to have a look if I can see the name of it. No, I can't see it.
Well,
it's something like that.
While Kate's looking, all Kate's links are in the description box as well, including she's got like a donation link to help with her education as well.
So I can't find out what the name of the operation was now, but it was leading on, and then there was another. It was leading on from the independent inquiry, and it happened while that was going on. And I know Ali Sultan, the second, his third court case with another survivor in 2019 was as a result of that operation. So they called for more witnesses, for more victims to come forward, and they managed to convict another 3 perpetrators. So I can't see what the operation was. Oh no, sorry, I'm looking at Operation Inquiry, Operation Chalice. Anyway, so I can't find out what the operation was called, but yeah. So that happened, and then the independent inquiry concluded in 2022, and then between 2022 and 2024, they were implementing the changes that they'd recommended within the inquiry. If anybody is interested in looking into more depth at what the inquiry brought out, it's all public on their website. Maybe I could drop it in the chat, or if somebody could, I don't know, I haven't got access to the chat. If you want to add it in later, maybe.
Yeah, send it to me after the interview, and I'll put it in the description box.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Yeah, so if you want to look at the full 120 pages in the inquiry, then please do. And things have changed as well now. So obviously the way they view children, I did kind of feel like, finally Telford know what a child is, and they know that a child can't consent to abuse. They can't consent to be ladies of the night. They can't choose that lifestyle. They don't have the emotional maturity to be able to make those decisions yet. They don't have the capacity to make those decisions. Finally, we've figured that out. I still think we have a lot of issues in terms of our attitudes towards each other and people. I think that it's a national problem, but it's worse in some areas, and I think it is particularly bad in Telford and Shropshire because we've got a lot of history. We're an old sort of factory town. The Industrial Revolution happened here. Also, a lot of it. There's a lot of that starting here. We started off with there's a lot of farming here. There's a lot of old-fashioned views, and I think it takes a long time for us as a nation to change our attitudes towards people. And I'm talking hundreds of years, not like tens of years, not like 20 years. It takes years and years for attitudes to change. And it was only about less than 300 years ago that slavery was legal in this country. So if it takes us that long to change, we're still gonna have reminiscent attitudes towards people. People of people of color, people of lower classes. We're still going to have opinions of negative opinions of women, and especially for some reason young women. And the younger the woman is, the worse the stigmatization is towards sex and anyway, towards them as a woman. Yeah, and it seemed to be the younger the woman is, even as a child, it was just getting younger and younger. And then what are we considering 11-year-old girls to be ladies of the night, and literally not understanding that that's not their fault. And actually, we need to do something about this. So just from reading the article, they're talking about an underage disco. So we used to call that, I think they're talking about chill. So I remember when I was at school, we used to go to chill, which was based at the ice rink in Telford. What they used to do is cover the ice rink floor, and then they'd have this underage disco. And I remember there being PDF files actually in there. So even though it was an underage party, there were full-grown male adults in there, and they weren't just Asian; they were white. In fact, most of them were white. So we have, and I still think we have a problem with sex offenders in Telford, of all races and of all types of multiple different types of abuse. So not just GGs, but family orientated abuse, stranger orientated abuse, unfortunately, things like teachers in schools, because you know that PDF files, they aim for jobs that are involving children, you know. So we're still not prosecuting enough. There's still, I still keep seeing things in the paper of perpetrators in Telford who have commit things like warning, what do you call it? Like warning, I don't know what you call it, warning crimes, you know, things like flashing in the changing rooms and flashing to children, and taking pictures of, you know, like, what do you call it, upskirting children, and those, and also viewing child um, videos that they shouldn't be. And it doesn't seem, the sentences don't seem harsh enough. The punishments don't seem harsh enough. Sometimes they don't seem to get punished at all, and they're just left to carry on um, with with their offending, and for it to escalate. Like, I just don't feel like enough is being done for those warning symptoms that are um, uh, gearing towards some more serious crimes. So it's inevitable that more serious crimes are going to happen because we're not punishing the crimes before they get to that stage. So shall I just talk about Tommy Robinson? I don't really
Okay,
know how
let
to lead it on.
let's put it in the context of your journey then.
All right. Okay.
Have we covered everything before you met him in parts 1 and 2, or is there still a little gap there that we need to fill?
I guess there's a couple of years gap. So, like I was saying at the beginning, just now, was that I had my court cases. So, I had talked in the last podcast about the police investigations. So, they arrested kind of 8 men, even though I've counted sort of 22 to 23 men that I was abused by in Telford. Should I just say S8? Sorry. So they arrested 8 men in connection with that. Only so, you know, I had to do loads of stuff like what do you call it when you see them in a picture, ID parades. I had to do 8 ID parades. Some annoyingly, some ID parades, I got them right, and that still wasn't enough evidence to get it to court. So, you know, even though there was a positive ID there, so they knew they'd got the right person, it still wasn't enough to get it to court. So, you know, I had some letdowns by the CPS, but 3 of them they managed to get to court. One of them was from a really horrific essay, which I didn't talk about in my first episode, which was actually perpetrated by a white man who was a soldier who somehow knew the GG. So he had some kind of connection to the GG, although I don't know what that was, because I met him in the capacity of some of my friends from my 6th form course. They knew him, and they introduced him to me, but not individually, like something seedy, like in a group. He came into a group of us, and then one day he gave me a call and said that he was in Wellington and that he needed a place to stay, and because he'd been out on a night out and he needed somewhere to stay, so could he stay at mine? So I was like, oh yeah, not even worrying about it at all. And then he turned up at my door. Obviously, I was expecting him, so I answered the door to him, and as soon as I answered the door, he attacked me. And yeah, it was really violent. It was really horrific. He was saying lots of, so I think he was on drugs. I think he was probably on that happy, the one that makes you happy. Yeah. And but he kept saying, like, all these people need to get out of the room. You need to get rid of all these people. and there wasn't anybody here. So like there wasn't anyone. It was like, so he was like terrifying me and saying all these weird things. And anyway, it was absolutely horrific. So I went to court in 2012, but he was found not guilty. He had because he'd been in the army. Because he'd been in the army, he'd got this expensive lawyer that the army paid for. He turned up in his army uniform, and he had other army members supporting him from the MOJ, not from the MOJ. What do you call it when it's the army? Anyway, whatever. The MOA, I don't know.
Ministry of Defence.
Defense, MOD. Yeah, I knew I was getting it wrong, and I was thinking, but I knew there's something. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. They also the jury weren't allowed to know everything, so they weren't allowed to know that I'd already been raped by Shamil at the time that he essayed me. Sorry, and they weren't allowed to know that I was already being harassed. They weren't allowed to know that he knew that. They weren't allowed to know loads of detail, and I think that the unfortunately the way that the court went, that it was just really inappropriate about what the jury were allowed to know and what they weren't allowed to know. So they couldn't get a clear picture of what was going on, and rightly so. You have to prove that's beyond reasonable doubt that this happened, and because there was so much holes in the prosecution case, it wasn't my fault, and also stuff they weren't allowed to know. And the defense barrister, the very expensive army defense barrister, did a very good job of weaving a web of confusion to the jury, so that they had to say not guilty. So I'm not angry with the jury at all, and I understand why that happened. But to be honest, it was a mistrial. They told me that that's not what it went down as. But they told me that I was very unlikely to get a retrial, so there was no point appealing it, which I don't think is the way to think, really, because if I got a right to appeal, then I should have just appealed it. But never mind, it's probably too late now. So that was that. And then the Shamil case went on. That was in 2011, so I've kind of like skipped the timeline there. But that went on for 2 weeks because I had, and that's a long time for a court case, because I had so many eyewitness accounts. So there was so much evidence that it happened, including the police officer who took my original report when they advised me to say it was consensual. And so even though they might have messed up at that time, it went down as very good evidence, and they didn't try to cover that up. They stood up and they said, that officer stood up and said, yes, she did come to us and tell us it was SA, and this is why we put consensual, etc., etc. So that went towards a conviction in the end, and I think it was very, very strong evidence. One thing that they like to see in your evidence and your story is that, especially in historic cases, is that your story has not changed since the moment it happened. So everyone you've ever told can come as a witness and be a witness to you telling them that this happened. And where they can see that your story hasn't changed, it's more likely that it did happen. So that the fact I reported it, the fact I'd spoken to a counsellor who also when I was at university, who also attended court as a witness, the fact that I told friends who also attended as a witness, all went in my favour and actually managed to secure a conviction. And he was convicted of 3 counts of SA against me, and he was sentenced to 3 10-year concurrent sentences. So they were So they were kind of like on top of each other, which means that they're all served at the same time. He was already in prison when that happened. So he was in prison for a IPP or PPI or indeterminate life sentence.
Indeterminate IPP, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons that he's still in prison now, because he could have been eligible for parole in 2020, but because of his IPP, they review it it gets reviewed every year, and they decide whether the
Oops. Has Kate frozen?
we've gone. Oh, yeah, it's okay. We're back.
Back.
All right, cool. And then I don't know. We could just skip forward to 2015 to Ali Sultan's case. It got adjourned 3 times. It was supposed to 2 times. It was supposed to happen in 2014, the year before. And then it got adjourned, and then it got adjourned again, and that was very stressful for me and really affected my mental health at the time. But when we finally had the court case for that, I think it only went on for a week this time. Yeah, he was found guilty of 2 counts of the R word and 1 count of attempted R word. Yeah, so and then he got 6 years in prison and 5 years on license for that. The police told me that if he'd have been found not guilty for that case, he would have been, because he was already in prison again for the R word of 2 underage girls. One was 13, one was 16 and pregnant. He would have served his sentence and been let out had he been found not guilty in my case. But thankfully, he was found guilty, so he got put in for another 5 years. And then we had the 2019 court case, which was with another victim who I don't know who that survivor is, and he was again sentenced. I'm not actually sure what the sentence was for that, but then he was sentenced again for a further amount of time in prison. Hence now why I think he got a total of 22 years, and he's done 15 years of that. As far as I'm understanding, I might have got that wrong. So you can check in newspaper articles if you want to add it up to be 100% correct on what that was. So I have gone through a huge healing journey throughout of all of this. I think the court cases helped me in a way because it gave me some closure, especially after the Shamil case, because I always felt that if I could get some closure and justice on Shamil, that would validate everything I went through afterwards, because I know that I was so psychologically affected by the first time I was essayed by Shamil, that impacted on the rest of me being vulnerable to all the other essay. So it was a big step in my recovery to secure that conviction. And then after the court, it was like I couldn't move on until after the court cases. So after my final court case with Ali Sultan, I passed my driving test. When I passed my driving test, it opened extra job opportunities for me. I'd been a nurse by this point since 2012, so my career was progressing. I was developing as a person within my career as well, because it's a tough job being a nurse. So you just learn how to be tough. You learn how to take on that responsibility. You learn, you develop some self-worth as well from the rewarding aspect of the role. And yeah, so I was moving on and I was feeling a lot better in myself. In 2015, after all the court case ended, I got some therapy with the NHS, with the community mental health team. And that was a 12-month course of therapy, weekly therapy. And it really, really helped me. That really set me up then for better mental health in the future. Before then, I was a bit of a wreck. And then after then, it really helped me to learn how to predict my flashbacks and things like that, and then prevent them. So that really, really helped. And then I don't know, I think I had this habit of running away a lot, and I think that was because I escaped from the Telford GG to Essex when I started university. And then after that, it became a bit of a like habit, which was a psychological thing. Because in my mind, I was like, some people can't leave their homes. Some people would like never leave their homes, but I can up and leave in a week if I need to. And I was quite happy to do that. So if something upset me or I just decided I didn't want to be there anymore, I would literally up and leave and move house. So I lived in Essex, I lived in Birmingham, and then I ran away from Birmingham and I lived in Kent. And these for like numbers of years, and I moved around while I was living in those areas as well. So I probably only stayed in a place for about 6 months before I moved house again. But I was sort of in an area of the UK for like 2 years at a time, and then I'd move on. So I went and lived in Kent, and then after Kent, I moved to London. And then it was while I moved to London in 2019, and it was when I was living in London that I encountered Tommy Robinson. So in 2019, I was working in an acute ward, a mental health ward. So I worked there for about 9 months before I then moved on to another role in central London with the crisis line. And I in 2020, we're in the middle of lockdown. I was getting a bit frustrated. I was feeling a bit like I was being silenced, and I was getting a bit like I was feeling as though survivor voices were being silenced, and it was really annoying me. And I watched this a drama series, which I've forgotten what it's called now, where one of a victim of SA outed her perpetrator in public, and everybody was commending her for that. And this the woman who wrote this drama, that somebody might mention it in the comments and might remember what it is. This woman who wrote this won awards for her for the performance. For she directed it and she acted it as well. And it annoyed me, and the reason it annoyed me is not her personally, but it annoyed me because we actually, as survivors, we can't do that. Like we legally can't out our perpetrators. The very people who abused us, we can't publicly say that they did this to me without a trial, and without a conviction. So many of the people that I've spoken to you about, I've only been able to name the people who were actually convicted. And people like Hakeem, I've had to make up his name, even though what he did to me was absolutely horrific. I'm not allowed to say it, and I'm not allowed to say it because he might sue me. He might take me to court and say she's committing slander against me. I did no such thing, and she hasn't got enough evidence to say that I did do this. So so it pissed me off, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it anyway. So I went on. I've actually still got the videos, but they're on private. So I made myself a video outing some of my perpetrators, and I was going to out all of them. I think I outed 5 of them on this video. And I outed, I was going to continue. I was like, I'm going to do another video outing the rest of them, and then I'm going to do another video outing the rest of them. I'm just going to keep going until I've run out of perpetrators. I'm going to turn around and victimize them for once. Anyway, I didn't end up doing that, but unfortunately for me, it caught the attention of Tommy Robinson and his crew. And I didn't know this at the time. So it was kind of August 2020. And I had no idea that I was being stalked online at this point. Are you still there? Can people still hear me?
Yeah, I'm still there. My battery,
Okay,
I'm just
you're
changing
frozen.
it. Keep going.
Yeah, okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, so I had a couple of weird messages on Facebook saying, we want you to be part of a documentary. This didn't have Tommy Robinson's name on it, so I was none the wiser. I just ignored it. There's quite a few little like vigilante groups that would be reporters that have got not even any training in reporting, and they're just taking it upon themselves to report on the grooming gangs. We'd even had people turning up on Wellington High Street, amateurs trying to talk to residents about the grooming gangs. So we'd had quite a lot of those silly little things like that, especially on X. X seemed to be full of these amateurs who I have no idea who they are, but they're just taking it upon themselves to follow this GG agenda. And so I just dismissed it and thought, I just said to them, I'm not interested. And that's it. And, I wasn't interested. And then I didn't know anything. Anyway, 6 months later, this is getting on January 2021 now. I've moved house by that point. I was living somewhere else in London because, like I said, I used to move house quite a lot. And I'd only been living in the place about a month, and I hadn't even changed my bank account yet to have the right name. I hadn't even changed my driving license to have the right address on it. And so I certainly hadn't even changed my, what do you call it? When you go on the electoral register, that's it. So I hadn't even changed the electoral register or anything, right? But I had reported a neighbour for disturbing the peace, kind of threatening me. It wasn't actually that big a deal, but I'd reported a neighbour. And in the report, now I regret this, in the report, it asked, is there anything that makes you more vulnerable? And I said, I'm a GG survivor from Telford, and this is really, really triggering for me. And then within about 6 days later, Tommy Robinson just randomly turned up at my door, completely out of the blue. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what was going on. I don't know how he knew where and that's what bothered me. I do not know how he found out where I lived, because my parents didn't even have my address yet, because I just moved into that place. So I've got a few theories about how he found out my address. First of all, I know that he's got a friend called Peter Keeley, who is an ex-MI5 agent, and he's the one who found my address. So I still don't know how he did that. One way is either maybe he traced my IP address from a post or something like that on Facebook or on Twitter or X. And maybe he hacked me without me knowing, and then that told him where the IP address of where I was living was, and that's how he ended up at my address. My other theory is, and this was so in a random conversation with somebody who's a cybersecurity officer for a private company. We weren't even on the subject of anything to do with me or anyone turning up at my house. But he randomly came out with the easiest way to find somebody's address is to impersonate a police officer over the police radio and just ask it from a police officer to police officer, and they will just hand over the address. So I don't know. And what I really hate about that is those radios, they're not recordable, or they're not recorded. I'm assuming that they're not recorded, or the radios aren't recorded, or there's no documentation to say that somebody's requested this address. It's just been requested verbally and then given verbally, and I can't imagine where the trace of it's gone. So yeah. Anyway, it really bothered me. I use a VPN all the time now. So since that day, I use a VPN, Nobody knows where I live. According to my VPN, I'm in a different area of the country every day. And I have an encrypted email service. I use like an extra safe password thing so that people can't hack me. I've gone back to using my pseudonym name so that people can't just know my name and turn up at my house, because that's another easier access for Tommy Robinson, was that he could find out what my real name was, and from that he could then find my location. He could request it from the police, for example. So 6 months after waiving my anonymity and revealing my real name, have a repercussion like that, somebody turning up at my house. So it bothered me. It really, really bothered me. And it just didn't sit right with me that Tommy Robinson was seeking out vulnerable victims of very violent crime, victims who have experienced extreme trauma in their life, that are suffering with mental health issues. And even though, I'm partly a strong person, I am still suffering from PTSD. PTSD isn't something that you are ever really fully recovered from. You might be in remission until you get another trigger, but that trigger could always come. And for me, Tommy Robinson turning up at my house was a massive trigger. So he described to me that he wanted to do this documentary. So he's talking about, the documentary that he did on Telford. So he was describing this documentary to me, and he said he was looking for survivors to talk in this documentary. And what he wanted was, he didn't like the fact. What he said was he didn't like the fact that these perpetrators has devastated the lives of survivors, of his victims, and their lives are absolutely destroyed because of what happened to them, while these unconvicted PDF files are going unpunished, and they're living lavish lifestyles. That's how he described to me. And I take lavish lifestyles with a pinch of salt, but only because what they would consider a lavish lifestyle, I would not consider that to be a lavish lifestyle. I wouldn't want to live their life at all. I wouldn't want to live their life. Anyway, but they're living the lavishest lifestyle that they envision for themselves. So he's not wrong in that way. So one thing I know, I did see the people are saying that Tommy Robinson is helping victims, and survivors, and so even when I was speaking to Tommy Robinson, he knows that I'm not a fan of him. He knows that I don't like him. I'm definitely not pro Tommy Robinson. What he said did resonate with me. He does have a point. We're not convicting the PDF files are still on the street. We're not convicting them. They're living out their lives as they want to, abusing whoever they want to, devastating the lives of the victims that they abuse, and then they're not being properly prosecuted. So I agree with that. But what I don't agree with is the fact that Tommy Robinson is profiting from this. So he, I don't know whether he's employed or whether he's like self-employed, but he has got a website that he works for, and he does this for money, and he does this for donations from people, mostly in America. So he's got a big American following. Yeah, he's exposing gangs to Americans. If his main audience is Americans, then what's the purpose of exposing the GG to Americans? For him, it's financial gain, and that's what bothers me. I'm just going to take a break just to breathe a moment, because I've got more to say on it, but I just want a moment to calm down.
That's fine. So viewers,
Yeah.
so Kate's links are in the description box. And let me just go down there right now. You can watch parts 1 and part 2 of her there in the description box. I've also put the link down there for our podcast with Raja Mia, who is a Muslim man who is disgusted by the GG. And he did work for the British government. He's very knowledgeable, very experienced, and he exposes the GG and how the Labour Party protect them, allegedly, in exchange for votes. So that podcast, Politicians Protect Sick Gangs for Votes. The link is down there. You can go to Kate on X, Insta, Facebook. They're all down there. And also her 3-year therapy course. She's got a GoFundMe page for that. So like I said in the very beginning, there's good and bad in everybody, folks. And, we had John Wedger on, ex-London Met cop. And he spoke very highly of Tommy, highlighting the GG in his documentary when, mainstream media won't go there. Tommy's a very divisive character. I can see in the chat. There's people who absolutely love him. There's people who absolutely hate him. I'm not passing a judgment. This is just Kate's story. And like I said, I was, if Tommy gets out, I'd like to get him on to hear his prison story. I can't imagine what it must have been like, or it's like in there now. Presently, he's still in there. I think he gets out later this year. Do you want to come back in, Kate?
Yeah, sorry, I was just taking a moment.
Okay.
So I don't know how I feel about him. So I'm not saying that I'm completely against him, because I do think that he's got a point in what he's saying. And if the authorities had been properly addressing GGs and addressing sexual abuse, SA, and CSE, then we wouldn't be in this predicament. Like, he wouldn't have to be raising awareness, because it would be being dealt with properly. And so he's like exploiting but not exactly exploiting. He's exploiting this gap in the law where people just aren't being prosecuted for SA. And hopefully this will go towards changing for the better. But one thing I think is that a negative impact of Tommy Robinson's campaigning is that he's dividing people. He's a very divisive person, as Sean said. And the government absolutely hate him. The government hate him. The police hate him, rightly or wrongly so. And it is causing them to shut down the conversation about GG all the time, because they're trying to fight him. They're trying to silence him. They're putting a lot of effort into silencing him. They're putting a lot of effort into trying to silence his followers. Because they're worried about the civil unrest that this is causing, because it's causing racist attacks, it's causing racial hatred, and it's causing a divide between the Muslims and the rest of the community. And there's pressure on the government to kind of be working with all sides, as it were. So there's the Muslim Council of Britain. They can't just let this happen. They can't just let him cause all this propaganda against Islam and let anyway. I need a break again.
No, you're fine.
So I think because of that, and I think it's wrong as well of the government to be silencing the subject, but it's causing them to silence the whole subject. And that's another thing that I think is, I don't even think that's necessarily Tommy Robinson's fault. That is the government's fault, because even if they don't like somebody and they're worried about what he's doing and they need to damage control in some way, they still need to address it. It still needs addressing. You can't just shove him under a rug, shove the whole GG issue under a rug and pretend it's not happening, or pretend it never happened, pretend it's been dealt with and now it's not happening, or pretend that we don't need to do anything else. I think that's totally wrong of them. So I just feel like Tommy Robinson is a bit caught in the middle of it all. If it wasn't for him, then some of this stuff wouldn't get raised. If it wasn't for him, Elon Musk wouldn't have said what he said. And then if Elon Musk hadn't said what he said, then there wouldn't be all this talk again about GGs within the government. So it is putting pressure on the government to do what they said they were going to do in the first place. So I actually think that's a positive that came out of what Elon Musk was saying. But I also wonder if Elon Musk did that as a favor for Tommy Robinson to get him more supporters, as in more funding, especially now that Tommy Robinson's in prison. So a lot of it is a fight for financial gain. That's what I'm worried about. And I don't necessarily think that's right, because it's not necessarily right to be profiting off survivors and turning up at their door out of the blue. The survivors of extreme violent crime turning up unannounced, uninvited, and obtaining their address in less than, in immoral ways, like however he obtained their address, was not the way you go about finding somebody's address. Not really. Yeah, so I'm on the fence about Tommy Robinson. Yeah, sorry. Go on, Sean.
So in prison, there was assorted people I lived with. Some have done some bad stuff, but my thing was focus on the good people. There's good and bad in everybody, and it helps that good come out. So that's become my philosophy. People think that
actually, yeah, you're right, Sean, because it's not as black and white as we're brought up originally to believe. Like, it's not as black and white as good and bad, and it's not as black and white as someone who commits a crime that makes them a bad person. So it doesn't, it's not that black and white. So it's really difficult to it's something that I had to learn over time, was how to judge somebody for whether they're safe for me or not. That's how I ended up learning how to judge someone, was not whether they commit a crime or not, because I knew lots of criminals. In fact, unfortunately, the bad kind of criminals as well. And sometimes I think about, was I a bad person because I was hanging around with PDF files? And sometimes I think, that was like, and maybe I considered that my friend circle, because I didn't have any other friend circle. So I was hanging out with PDF files, and what does that make me? Like, show me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. And I'm thinking, well, hopefully it just tells you that I'm a survivor, that I'm a victim, and that I was a victim in that. But it's definitely not that black and white. And I just had to learn about judging people by who is safe for me. And as long as Tommy Robinson is at a distance and not at my house, I'm not too worried. But if he's at my house, then he's a potential risk to me. So for example, he's a risk to my livelihood, because if I associate with, and I, perhaps this is wrong as well, if I associate with him, then I could lose my job. I could be labelled with him. I could lose all my friends through being guilty by association, by associating with him. And I have a lot at stake. He kind of threatens everything in my life. And unfortunately, that means that I can't just be mates with him.
So let me just try and distill this down a bit then. What Katie's saying is she went through these horrific things, and then she's putting it past, it's in her past, she's trying to move on. And then Tommy Robinson, this hugely high-profile guy who's so controversial. I mean, if you're not in the UK, he is insanely controversial. Shows up at a house out of the clear blue when she's trying to put this behind her, which has caused her to, it's brought back the memories of this stuff. And she thinks that an association with him could have also caused her other problems in life, which is fair enough. This is Kate's story. This is her perspective. This is what she went through. She's not taking away from the good side of Tommy, whereby he is at the tip of the spear on exposing the GG.
Yeah.
He's brought a lot of publicity to it. We
Thanks
spoke
for
to Maggie
defending Sean.
Oliver. We spoke to Maggie Oliver. We spoke to John Wedge, ex-cops, who have highlighted the good side of Tommy. And like I said in the very beginning, I'd like to get him on to talk about his prison stories when he does get out.
Yeah, I understand why people are defending him, or feel that they need to defend him, because a lot of people say really bad things about Tommy Robinson. A lot of people write him off without thinking logically about it and deeply about it. But I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to be fair about it. He's not a good person or a bad person in my books. He's just, I could just do without big heart. I thought he was a terrorist, to be honest. I mean, but I don't really know much about him because I wasn't really following it. I'm not really into politics. I'm not really into big activisms. I'm not really into doing marches or anything. It's not that I'm against that sort of stuff. It's just, I'd rather stay safe in my own home than go to a rally or something. So I was just leaving him to it, and I didn't really know anything about him. So when he turned up at my house and said, "Oh my God, there's a terrorist at my door," he laughed at me. He laughed at me because he laughed at the thought of being called a terrorist. Yeah. So I just thought, I thought he was a far right terrorist. I thought he was one of the most dangerous people in the world at the time when he turned up at my house. And I know that I'm not saying that I think that now.
And that's what the media portrayed him to be. And
it really freaked me out.
When I was discussing having him on the channel with some of my family members, and they were completely horrified because they just watch mainstream media and buy into the BS. And earlier on I mentioned about my philosophy is focus on the good in people, and a lot of people in the chat are kind of making blanket statements about religions. So I've read the Quran, I've read the Bible, I've read the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddhist texts, and there is good and bad in every religion. You can read the Bible and you can find the craziest things in the world in there, and you could take them and say they want you to do to our word and pillage and unalive people, or you could take the most lovely parts of the Bible and say, they want you to treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself and all this other stuff. It's same for those three texts, the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. They've all got the same cast of characters in them, and you could take any part of them and interpretate it to say anything you want. And like I said, we've interviewed Raja on here. He's a Muslim guy, and he is disgusted by the GG, and he's standing up against it. So there are good people in every religion, as there are bad people in every religion. There are predators in every religion. We have gone after elite predators. I've written books about it. Elite predators, Savile, Epstein, etc. We've talked about Diddy and what happened in that community. And the GG in this country, it just happens to be that the way it's classified, many of them it's classified as Asian GG by some entities, and they have distilled it down to a lot of the perpetrators have come from Pakistan, I believe. But you know more about that, Kate.
Yeah, I think I don't actually know the statistics, so I can only tell you from my story. So they were mainly Pakistani. That's not everybody's story. Some perpetrators came from different areas. They might still have been Muslim if we're talking about GGs, but they might not have been. So, you know, I actually was abused by some Sri Lankans at one point. I haven't talked about that in my story because I've just got so many stories, not in a funny way, but I have. And the Sri Lankans they were Christian. And one of the things they said to me when I got in the car with them, when I should not have done that, was, "Don't worry, we're Christian." Yeah, "Don't worry,
Wow.
we're Christian." And then you know, I proceeded to get essayed and then have to escape a more serious situation. Well, you know, the continuation of the essay, I did manage to get away that time, but not without being essayed first. So yeah, it definitely, there's good and bad in every religion, every area. There might be some more issues in different areas depending on their level of what do you call it, crime fighting in their country, like England, for example, where the police don't do anything when somebody is essayed. I don't know. I don't know how it could get worse in any other country than it is in our own. You know, I personally don't think we should be accepting asylum seekers because we are not a safe country for them to come to. All the stuff that is happening in their country happens in our country as well. We have modern slavery. People who are asylum seekers are very vulnerable people, and they are more likely than some other people to be victims of modern slavery. And as we have slave owners and perpetrators of modern slavery in this country, then I don't think we should be accepting asylum seekers because they're at risk.
Yeah,
They're at risk of us.
unfettered immigration has caused and continues to cause chaos across Europe. And that whole thing is just a ploy by the evil globalists. Let's bomb the poorest countries in the world, make trillions of dollars off it, bring them back to our own countries where we can convert them into a cheap labor force competing against the domestic population. And the ones who aren't working, you know, we'll put them on a benefit scheme whereby we'll make hundreds of millions housing them in hotels, doing this every way it turns. These parasite politicians, the cronies, the contractors just make money off it. It's absolutely obscene. Meanwhile, they're cutting the benefits for the citizens of this country, cut the pensioners' winter allowance, cut this. But they can spend fortunes on Ukraine war, spend fortunes on excessive, unfettered immigration. The whole thing is just a scam. But I'm on a soapbox right now, so let me get off it. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left, Kate. And
oh, sorry.
have you wrapped up the Tommy story, or did you want to go over to questions? How do you want to? What do you want to do with this last 15 minutes?
Yes. Okay. I mean, I don't know how to wrap up the Tommy Robinson story, to be honest. I think it's ongoing. I did find him quite a scary individual. He does know some of the so he knows I mean, he's got mates all over the world who are world leaders, and they're they're known white supremacists as well. So he's up there in the ranks of like some of the top. I don't know if anyone believes in what's it called, the Illuminati, but that's what Tommy Robinson kind of reminds me of. I don't really know anything about that either, but there's some kind of conspiracy there, which he is involved in. And with Elon Musk saying what he said, and Elon Musk being the richest man in the world, that just even solidifies my fears that there's some conspiracy theory going on there. I don't even believe in conspiracy theories, but after meeting Tommy Robinson, I do. Now I can see it going on. Way to make me paranoid.
Leah saying it makes me not want to live in this country anymore, to be honest. Leah, we moved away from London. The crime is just getting out of control with the gangs over there, not just the GG.
I'd love to move somewhere else.
The drug gangs and And it's the politicians, you know, they couldn't give a crap about us. As long as they're in the bunkers or the luxury properties, raking all this money in, they don't give a crap. Do you want me to go with some questions then?
Yes, yeah. Happy to
All
go
right,
for it.
so we've got
As long as they're nice to me.
from Haley. Did any of the people that you know got pregnant? What happened to them and the babies? Did they keep them or did they get rid of them? So I think Haley's referring to people who got pregnant, you know, through these through the GG.
So I do know I know people who had multiple abortions. I know survivors who kept their children. I know survivors who did kind of birth their children. I can't think in a way to say that, but then were taken away from them by social services. I've also met survivors who social services gave their children to their SA abuser and to their abuser's family, and they're not allowed any contact with their own child because the abuser's family took them away from her. So I've met some really, women who have been in some absolutely terrible situations and really traumatic lives where they've been affected for life because of it, and they've not even got access to their children, and their children's actually handed over to their abuser, which I can't even imagine how that must
Yeah,
feel.
so if people watch The Three Girls on the BBC with Maggie Oliver, two of those girls did get pregnant through the GG, and I interviewed one of those women and Maggie Oliver again. It's Amber, actually, as she's portrayed in The Three Girls, and that podcast should be coming out hopefully around the end of this month.
Yeah, I'd love to watch that as well, Sean.
All right, here's another question for you then from Leah. Have you had EMDR treatment?
So it's been offered to me a few times, but it's never ended up having, or it's been offered or it's been suggested, but it's never actually transpired. So I haven't had EMDR therapy before. I'm not 100% sure if that would be the right therapy for me, because I've heard EMDR therapy is very, very good for the type of PTSD that is from sort of one incident. But the fact that I've got so many multiple incidents, we'd be doing EMDR therapy for a long time. So I don't
Yeah,
know whether it'd be helpful or not to me. I have had
I've
trauma-informed therapy.
I've had EMDR for a few
Oh yeah.
individual incidents, and I actually went to a weekend workshop many years ago, and got trained to do it, and it is
Oh
really
wow.
effective, really fast. You move your eyes basically in a certain way
Yeah.
and think about this thing, and it moves the thing from one part of your brain to another where the trauma
Mm,
isn't as strong surrounding it. So when you go
hmm
when you remember it again, the trauma's either gone or vastly reduced.
mm.
So yeah,
So it sounds
uh,
like you must have found it helpful then for you to be passionate enough to um,
yeah, I did.
actually train in it. So what's your opinion then on whether it would be suitable for my type of trauma or not? Just out of
So
interest.
one of the pioneers of it actually sent me his book when I was in prison, and I kept in touch with him, and he invited me to do all that. And I think that if you've been in a highly intensive PTSD creating environment, you know, like incarcerated, I was in there for 6 years for my ecstasy case. People, you know, getting unalived. You think something could happen to you every day. You constantly, adrenaline's going. So for that, I have had a multi-pronged approach whereby I credit yoga, meditation, fitness classes, including swimming, karate, all that kind of stuff, psychotherapy, the electronic, the eye technique, the eye movement technique that we're just referencing. I've had shaking therapy, whereby if you look at animals in the wild when they're traumatized, they sit under a tree, for example, and shake the trauma off, and they put you through these positions whereby and then they lay you down, and your body just starts. It's almost like you're having a seizure, but afterwards, some of the trauma has been worked off. I've gone to workshops and done intensive inner engineering, and I would just credit all of those things as on that path of self-healing, bit by bit, that they've reduced my trauma. Yeah.
Sounds interesting. I might ask you to like write down in a list what all those are, so I remember.
Yeah, no
I'm gonna
worries.
look
No
them
worries.
up one by one.
A lot of the guys I've interviewed who've been in prison have been really traumatized, who have done well after prison. They've credited martial arts, boxing, and just keeping, because if you're doing the physical, it controls the mental, and if you're doing these
Yeah,
physical activities, those brain chemicals, the
yeah,
endorphins, are
yeah,
actually healing
yeah,
you.
yeah,
If you just sat around all day dwelling on what's happened to you, then you're just releasing the cortisol and the
yeah.
poisonous chemicals. So it's
And
important to
since
get
I
out and
Yeah, that's good. Since I've been doing my therapy course as well, we're big on the course that I'm doing is big on pluralistic therapy, which is using a mixture of therapies, like basically assessing people as an individual and understanding that not one type of therapy fits all. So it sounds a bit like that's what is needed for your prison friends. They've been doing a bit of a mixture of different things that's worked for them. Sorry to
someone
call them friends, acquaintances. Sorry.
Simon in the chat just put, this channel is great therapy. Love this community. Oh, thanks, Simon. So Pam's asking, Kate, have you written a book? Because you should be able to tell your truth. I agree.
So I have written a book. It's not published at the moment, but I'm just in the process of signing the contracts for a publishing deal. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, kind of like touch wood and touch your head and whatever you're supposed to touch, because it can jinx it. It can jinx it if I talk about it. So so I shouldn't be mentioning it, but hopefully I should be we're just working some fine lines out with the contracts, and then that will be up and ready to go. So I've written the book already, so the manuscript is all done, ready to go. But they did say that they estimated it would be 2026 before it comes out, so you might just have a bit of a wait. But yeah, I am finally starting to be able to share my story and get my story out there, and that's what Sean's helping me to do. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to speak on the Sean Atwood True Crime podcast, which I can't actually say. I keep saying True Crime. It sounds like a tongue twister to me.
Oh, well, we're honored to have you on. So is there anything you would like to say in conclusion then to the viewers as we end this series?
I think it's hard to find a conclusion to all three episodes. I suppose it's just that that's part of what happened in a nutshell. I found it quite an interesting journey myself coming on the podcast and going through it. So it's been an experience for me as well. And if you want to know more, because loads more happened that I missed out because I can't fit it all into like 3 podcasts, then just wait for my book to get out. Follow me, share my things, and just keep in touch, or keep me up there. And then when my book comes out, you can read the rest of it.
You're such a fantastic speaker, Kate. Have you thought about doing your own YouTube channel?
Oh yeah. Oh, thanks for reminding me. So I've got one video up at the moment, which I was like introducing the podcast. You know what? I've since then I've recorded 3 times, and I just don't like anything that I've done. So I'm kind of like in the process of like freaking out about it and getting really upset, and then having a hissy fit, crying my eyes out, having to go back to it, feeling like an idiot, and then deleting everything I've done and doing it all over again.
Have you actually got a channel link right now?
Yeah. So I think, it's just called, I think I'm Kate Elysia 1. I think I'm just.
Well, we need to get this up because this is our chance for people to subscribe. Kate Elysia.
But I've literally got one.
Kate Elysia.
What's my? Yeah, so I'm at Kate Elysia 1, all one word. I'll just click view your channel. Yeah, that's it.
Right, I think I've almost got it. 1 second. Yep, so you've got 16 subscribers. Is it that one?
Yes.
Kate Elysia 1?
Yes, and it says I've got two videos, but I actually deleted one. Oh no, I have got two because I've got a little short from one video that I ended up deleting because I didn't like the rest of it.
Let me get this.
I kept the short because I quite like the short.
Get this in the description box, and I'll also put it in the live chat as well right now, so we can get you some subs and people can, follow what updates you do. And if we've got any like panels or anything on this subject, we'll get you back here as well.
Oh yeah, thanks. So panels like multiple people talking. I love that kind of thing. I don't get to do that very often.
Yeah, get you on with Maggie Oliver and such. If there's any breaking news on the GG, in politics and stuff like that. All right, folks. So there you have it. We've got all of Kate's links. We've got Kate on X, YouTube now, Insta, Facebook, the GoFundMe for the 3-year therapy course. We've got parts 1 and parts 2 if you've missed them. We've got Raja, the link to Raja's podcast. And that is about it. Thursday night is tomorrow. I think we've got a JFK panel coming at 9:30. Saturday night, we've got a royal commentator coming on who's never been on before. And I think Jen's going to join me on that one. But huge thank you to Kate for her bravery and being such a fantastic guest. So much love and respect to you.
Thanks, Sean. And if anyone's got any more questions that they didn't get a chance to ask, just message me on X or on Facebook. I'm quite happy to answer any other questions.
Oh, is baby Ziggy coming in to wave goodbye to everyone? You want to come wave goodbye to everyone, baby Ziggy? Does he? Should I grab him? Put a 1 in the chat if you want Ziggy to come and wave goodbye.
Yeah. No, I put it in the chat. Hey!
Oh.
Oh.
You're going to wave to Kate?
Hello.
Wave goodbye.
Hello, Ziggy.
He's smiling at you. He's smiling at you.
Have to smile back.
We're going to say bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Good night. Oh.
Bye.
Bye. I'm going to end the live. There we go.